Japanese verbs are easy. You see, there are 5 vowels in Japanese, a, I, u, e, o, and all verbs end on the u, ro, kana.
Nice.
In order to conjugate any of these verbs, you simply shift the u into a different row. For example, nomu, meaning drink, can be noma, nomi, nome, or nomo. However, unlike English conjugations that directly change the verb's meaning, the main purpose of conjugations in Japanese is to allow you to attach helper verbs and helper adjectives. For example, shifting the verb nomu into its e stem, nomi, allows you to attach the helper verb mas to make the word formal, or the helper adjective tai to imply desire. This means that the entirety of nomimasu should not be seen as a single conjugation. Instead, nomi is the conjugation, while masu is simply another helper verb. This means that in reality, Japanese only has 5 conjugations, 4 of which we'll cover in this video. And before we progress any further, if anyone has any doubts about this being the way verbs work in Japanese, a simple Google search of kokugo doushi katsuyo will show you plenty of examples of how Japanese people really learn about verb conjugations.
Jouzu.
To start us off, let's take a look at the most important conjugation, the E stem. As with every other stem, there are a handful of helper verbs and adjectives that only the E stem can take. However, unlike every other stem, the E stem can also attach to basically every other word. This power of the E stem is also why it's known as the renyo-ke in Japanese, the connective use form. And this is the most important stem because we see it so often in daily life. For example, if I wanted to say that I want to do something, I would use the helper adjective tai. Since tai can only attach to the E stem, every single godan verb would follow the exact same rule. Nomu, to drink, would become nomi plus tai, want to drink. Tsukau, to use, would become tsukai plus tai, want to use. Hanasu, to speak, becomes hanashi plus tai, want to speak. Okay, but with the verb taberu, why do we say tabetai, not taberitai? Well, that's because taberu is an ichidan verb, not a godan verb. If you don't know how to tell the difference yet, click on this video to learn how now. The E stem can also attach to regular words that aren't helper verbs and adjectives. For example, nomimono. Nomi, the E stem of nomu, while mono is the noun meaning thing. So drink thing, in other words, a beverage. Tsukaekata. Tsukai, the E stem of tsukau, use. Kata, a noun meaning way. Altogether, it's the way of using something. Hanashi au. Hanashi, the E stem of hanasu, talk, while au is another verb that means to meet. So to talk and meet together means to discuss. There is one final use of the E stem, and that is to nominalize a word. In other words, to turn a verb into a noun. For example, the verb yasumu, meaning the action to rest. Changing it into its E stem gives us yasumi, which means a rest. And if you've ever watched any school-related anime, you would have surely heard the term natsuyasumi, meaning summer break or summer vacation. As you can see, it is through and through a noun. Oh, and by the way, the tool that I'm using here automatically underlines all the words that I don't know, which in this case is just 2%. I can batch create Anki cards with all these words, including the definition, reading, pitch, sentence and audio, and screenshot, all within a few minutes just by using the sponsor of this video, Migaku. Click this video up here to learn how to use Migaku, or scan this QR code to get your second month off Migaku for free. Next, let's take a look at the A stem. Fortunately, it's a lot easier because it only takes a handful of helper adjectives and verbs. Starting with anything negative, you can simply attach nai, z, or nu. For example, shiru means to know. If I wanted to say I do not know, I would change shiru into its A stem, shira, then add nai, shiranai. And to say without knowing, I would add z, so shirazu. And a very old-fashioned way of saying shiranai is shiranu, that's the same thing. The aforementioned nomu becomes nomanai, don't drink, nomazu, without drinking, or nomanu, same as nomanai. Ichidan verbs like taberu do what they always do, simply drop the ru, so you would get tabenai, tabezu, or tabenu. Oh, one more thing, if the verb ends on an u, you do not change it into a a, you change it into a wa. The reason it's like this is just because it's an ancient relic of old Japanese. This, by the way, is the one and single only exception in this entire system. Onto the A stem, you can also attach the receptive helper verb deru, dareru, as well as the helper causative verb seru, saseru. Both of these deserve a video of their own, which I'll link up here once it's done. But the main gist of it is that the receptive deru dareru indicates that the subject is receiving a certain action. To say that the dog drank water, where the dog is the subject, we can say 犬が水を飲んだ. Nonda being the past tense of nomu. However, we can also say the water got drunk by the dog. In this case, water is the subject and it is getting drunk. So because it is receiving an action, we have to use the receptive deru dareru. 水が犬に飲まれた. In this case, mizu is the subject because it is marked by ga, and the main engine of the sentence is the verb eta, which is the past tense of deru. Because it is a verb-ending sentence, this is an A does B sentence, where the water does get. What does it get? It gets drunk by the dog. For ichidan verbs, instead of attaching deru, we will attach da deru. So to say that you got eaten, you would not say tabereta. You would say taberareta. The causative seru saseru is also very similar. The short of it is, if I want to say that I make someone do something, or let someone do something, or in any way allow or cause someone to do something, I will use seru saseru. For example, kusuri o nomu simply means to drink medicine, but kusuri o nomaseru means to make someone drink medicine. Obviously, for ichidan verbs, you would use saseru instead of seru, so tabe saseru instead of tabeseru. If that's still a bit confusing, don't worry about it for now. This video was a wide overview of all the tools in the workshop, not necessarily how to use each tool in detail. Next, let's take a look at the e stem. The first use of the e stem is to turn something into a command. So for example, if we turn nomu into nome, nome is the command to drink. Similarly, turning tsukau, use, into tsukae, you are commanding someone to use something. And in anime, you hear this a lot. Shinu, die, turns into shine, go die, or the command to die. For ichidan verbs, it's a little bit different. You can't just leave it blank. You either have to attach yo, or more commonly, do. So for example, okiru becomes okiro, as in the command to tell someone to wake up. The e stem has one more use, and that is to turn the verb into a hypothetical. There are two ways to do this, and the first way is to use the particle ba. This creates a conditional statement. So for example, if I say nomeba, I'm saying if drink. Tsukaeba, if use. Hanaseba, if speak. Ichidan verbs are again a little bit different. You have to use reba instead of just ba. So tabereba is if eat. Okireba is if wake up. The second way to create a hypothetical is to use the helper verb ru. Yes, the single kana ru is in fact a verb, as can be backed up with the Japanese dictionaries. When you attach a ru to the end of an e stem, it becomes the potential form, basically saying that you can do something. For example, nomeru, can drink or is drinkable. Tsukaeru, can use or is usable. Hanaseru, can speak or is speakable. Ichidan verbs being a little bit special as always do not take ru, it takes dareru, which if you've been paying attention causes a problem because that's exactly the same as the receptive dareru. This means that taberareru can either mean the receptive got eaten or the potential can eat or is edible. This is not really as confusing as it sounds because it's similar in English. You don't really get confused between to, and to. Furthermore, there has been a recent phenomenon that affects only ichidan verbs called da nuki or da removal. This is particularly common with young people and it basically removes the da from the potential form. So now instead of taberareru having two meanings, this now strictly means the receptive form, while tabereru is now strictly the potential form. And finally, we get to the last stem, the o stem. Fortunately, the o stem is very easy as it only takes the helper verb u. Yes, u by itself is also a verb. Doing this turns the verb into its volitional form. In other words, when you want to say, let's do something. For example, let's drink is nomo. Let's use is tsukao. Let's talk is hanaso. Ichidan verbs want to take yo instead of just u. So let's eat is not tabeu, it's tabeyo. Okay, so now that we've gone over every single stem, I feel that it is imperative to explain why I said we should not treat this entire thing as one single conjugation, but instead learn that this is the conjugation and this is a separate verb or adjective. And there are two reasons for this. The first being, when we start to combine different forms together, this makes a lot more sense. For example, if I wanted to say that I was not made to drink something, I would first have to start with the verb nomu, then change it into causative because I was made to do something, then change it into receptive because I'm the one receiving that order, then change it into negative because it was not made to do something, then change it into past tense because that's the tense I chose. Now, it sounds like a mouthful, but it can actually be accomplished pretty easily. So first we start off with the plain form. Next, we need to attach the causative sitter. And how do we do this? That's right, we have to turn this into its A stem. So we can simply change this into ma, then add sitter. This gives us nomaseru. But how do we turn this into receptive? Well, if we treat sitter as an individual verb, which it is by the way, according to the Japanese dictionaries, then we can also understand that sitter is an ichidan verb because it ends on iru. As such, to turn sitter into receptive, we simply cut off the ru. So this gives us da, de, ru. Because remember, ichidan verbs don't just take deru, it has to take da deru. Okay, so now that we have another verb here, da deru, how do we turn this into negative? Well, look again. How does this end? Deru, meaning this is also an ichidan verb. We can simply cut off the ru and add nai to turn it into negative. And finally, to turn the adjective nai into past tense, it's something that I haven't covered in this video, but basically we just turn this into nakatta. As you can see, we can simply break this down into 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 steps. It is 100% logical and shows the Lego-like structure of the Japanese language. The second reason relates to this ancient video that I made in the past, explaining how Japanese only has 2 types of sentences and how the end of a sentence changes what type of sentence it is. So if we take a look at these 2 sentences, biru o nomu and biru ga nomitai, we can discover an oddity here. You see, in the first sentence, it ends on the verb nomu. Therefore, it is an A does be sentence. And the o particle is the direct object of the verb nomu. So A does be, subject does verb. What is the subject? Subject here is marked as 0 ga, so it is it. It does drink. What does it drink? It drinks beer. However, in the second sentence, it ends on the adjective tai, meaning it is an A is be sentence. And so in this scenario, the O particle makes no sense because there is no verb to attach to. That is unless you understand that the nomi and the tai are separated. In this way, the O particle can attach to the nomi while the tai stays as the engine of the sentence. Which means that biru o nomitai is an entirely valid, grammatically correct sentence and is not an exception to any of the core rules. It is simply said less commonly than biru ga nomitai. To learn more about the O particle, the adjective tai, and subjectivity in Japanese, click on this video up here. Finally, if you've been doing your own research, you would have also found this chart that Japanese people use. This system wants to call both the O stem and the A stem as the mizenke. So if you ask someone where do I put nai and they tell you the mizenke, they are basically saying that you can say nomonai, which you cannot. In other words, this system is flawed and we should stop using it. To put everything you've learned into practice, click on the video on the left to find out how to use this website called Dawn's Japanese Conjugation Drill. And if you want to learn about the 5th stem, the te form, click on the video on the right.